The Incredible Hulk is the ultimate tragedy.
I can't get too excited.
Not even a little excited.
Most iterations of the character fit into our modern conceptions of the genre. Bruce Banner is a man that is always suffering. His life is often composed of one sorrowful event after another, and any victories are either short-lived or bittersweet. The 1978 Incredible Hulk TV series takes this to the next level, by harkening back to the essential characteristics of Greek tragedy.
And I thought, well, maybe I could take a little Victor Hugo and a little bite out of Robert Louis Stevenson, Jekyll and Hyde thing, and this ridiculous thing called The Incredible Hulk, and turn it into a real adult project about a guy who had brought down the curse upon himself in the classic tradition of Greek tragedy, where the protagonist messes with stuff better left to gods, and the gods don't like that.
Hulk as a concept is often viewed through the lens of Greek myths and storytelling.
Prometheus, right? The guy who steals fire from the gods for people, but he gets burned doing it and is cursed. And that's how I thought about it. I was like, if we could do something like that, this guy who thinks he's going for something good that's going to help humanity, and he cracks open like the backside of God and takes something out that is not meant to be taken out, and now he's cursed. Bill Bixby was cursed. The end of every show, you were like, oh my God, he's still cursed, like alone in the world and cursed.
It's the story of a good man cursed with a terrible but uncontrollable power, naturally leading to questions of morality and human existence. In 1977, the pilot for The Incredible Hulk debuted, starring Bill Bixby as Banner.
If you just help me, if you just tell me, and
Lou Ferrigno as the Hulk. It presented a shockingly well-written story, diving into the psychology of a man and how he caused his own downfall. Despite its contentious relationship with its own origins, it's a story made with passion, by people seeking to elevate the material, and it serves as an exemplary case of Greek tragedy. Aristotle was the first to outline in detail what makes a good tragedy. To him, tragedy's purpose is to evoke certain negative emotions in the audience, thus cleansing them of these feelings, leading to a deeply satisfying experience, catharsis. In poetics, Aristotle cites Oedipus Rex by Sophocles as an exemplar of tragedy.
I was trained at Carnegie Mellon University, of course, in the classic theater, from Sophocles all the way up to Harold Pinter. And I've really tried to make that a touchstone and a cornerstone of all of my own work, to try to give it as classical an underpinning as I possibly can.
The Incredible Hulk evokes this structure of storytelling, which is why it was so effective at the time, and has since become a memorable classic.
It's interesting, Stan had always said that it was really the Hulk, our series actually, that really started the snowball of the Marvel that we know today.
Since it ended, live-action adaptations of the Hulk have tried to emulate what made that show so beloved.
Marvel wasn't afraid to adopt what worked in the past.
We wanted to go back to the broader sense from the comics and really the fugitive-type manhunt structure of the television series, which was just brilliant. It was a great structure for the Hulk.
By evoking this classic storytelling structure, the show was able to harness universal themes, complex characters, emotional depth, and well-paced narrative to construct a story that, to this day, people find engaging and gratifying. The elements of tragedy, as laid out by Aristotle, are diction, character, thought, song, spectacle, and plot. In this deep dive into the pilot episode of The Incredible Hulk, we'll explore the writing, the behind-the-scenes drama, the show's legacy, and how it used elements of tragedy to create a satisfying story. We begin with white titles on black, played against eerie background ambience. And then the title card, Within Each of Us. Oft-times there dwells a mighty and raging fury. The pilot wastes no time establishing a grim tone.
I was interested in setting up a tone immediately at the beginning of the picture. You can hear the sound effects sort of low and growly and thunderous under here.
This promises the audience a serious story that will delve into meaningful subject matter, and it's a promise it makes good on. The pilot is particularly sparse with humor, and while the rest of the series has its silly moments,
do something! Not me!
it mainly endeavors to be earnest and honest with the material.
I'll miss you, David.
When producer-director-writer Kenneth Johnson took on adapting the Hulk, he was determined to make it a serious adult show.
When Universal first came to me with the idea of doing one of the Marvel Comics superheroes, Frank Price called me and said, "We've just acquired the rights to 5 of them. Which one would you like to do?" And I said, "Gee, none of them, Frank. I just don't connect to people in spandex and primary colors." And my wife, Susie, had given me a book, and this is Victor Hugo's Les Miserables. And I realized, well, there was a way to take a little bit of Victor Hugo, a little bit of Robert Louis Stevenson, and this ludicrous thing called The Incredible Hulk, and turn it into a serious psychological adult drama. I was very anxious to cast exactly the right person in the leading role. I needed someone who would bring an adult following to it, who was a serious actor, and who would not be thought of as being in something that was anything other than first class. Bill Bixby was my first and only choice.
The opening title card contributes to this tone, and to our first element of tragedy, diction. In this context, it refers to the choice of language and dialogue. In tragedy, diction should be elevated, formal, and appropriate to the magnitude of the plot. To Aristotle, a tragedy is separated from other forms of storytelling by its serious and significant subject matter. This title card is written formally, with a deep underlying meaning that the pilot, and the show as a whole, thoroughly explores. Its word choice is particular to express these ideas. A mighty and raging fury paints a picture of an anger that is powerful and violent, which permanently lives within someone. This perfectly encapsulates the events to come. The pilot explores the anger that lives within Banner, and how it eventually turns him into a powerful and violent monster. The series follows his fruitless attempts to cure himself of this beast fueled by anger. The quote also states that this fury oftentimes dwells in each of us. The series is an exploration of how everyone possesses an inner demon, with the potential to turn them into monsters.
What we would try to do was episodes of The Incredible Hulk as a series that manifested the Hulk in different ways in different people. For Banner, it was, of course, anger. For other people, it was maybe alcoholism, or it was obsession, or it was greed that would turn them into something other than the good human being they were.
The underlying theme was really self-control, was really how to control the raging beast that dwelled within him. In Dr. Banner, his demon within was anger. But with other people, it could be alcohol, or it could be drugs, or it could be obsession, or it could be greed.
The thoughtful wording of the title card alone is a testament to the power of diction. I ask that you pay attention to the clips from the pilot that will be shown throughout this video. You'll find dialogue that is equally well written, sincere, and layered with meaning. The titles fade into a montage of Banner and his wife Laura. Their days are bright and cheerful, in strong juxtaposition to the tone of the titles.
In this montage, I was anxious to set up a really warm, loving relationship between Laura and her husband David. Again, yellow, the color of warmth, the color of the sun, became our thematic color.
This contrast gives the montage a sinister undertone, foreshadowing the disaster to come. They're driving along the road when one of their tires blows out, causing the car to flip and roll. Banner is thrown out, but Laura is trapped inside. The car lands upside down and catches fire. Banner tries to get her out, but the door is pinned. With desperation and outrage, he tries to lift the car, yet it isn't enough. Banner wakes up, alone. The sudden quiet creates a strong effect, and helps portray a man who's lost everything.
The yellow lamp in the background, sort of the only last lingering touch of Laura.
With expeditious storytelling, the pilot sets up Banner's trauma, his anger, and his motivation. The episode has managed to convey this in less than 5 minutes, using mostly visuals, music, and sound design. At the Culver Institute, we meet Elaina. She's working with Banner to research the hidden strengths all humans possess, but only manifest in particular circumstances. She's told that the reporter Jack McGee wants to interview them.
Yeah, he's from the National Register, wants to interview us.
National Register is not exactly the Washington Post.
No, not exactly. That's why we've been ducking him.
The first we hear of McGee, his paper is implied to be disreputable and trashy, like those celebrity gossip mags you see in grocery stores. Later, Banner tells McGee,
Your newspaper is only interested in reporting murder, rape, horoscopes, UFOs, and Farrah Fawcett.
Which begs the question, why would McGee be interested in Banner and Elena's research? It's not nearly as gory or outrageous as what he typically writes about. If I had to guess, I'd say the story needs an excuse to introduce McGee early on. Towards the end of the episode, McGee plays a crucial role, a role that then extends throughout the whole series. It did feel strange for someone so important to suddenly show up so late into the pilot. He'd seemed too much like a plot device rather than a character. For the sake of proper pacing and setup, the pilot contrives to get McGee into the story earlier. When Banner arrives, Elaina tries to make conversation.
I think that computer ought to run for Congress. You ask it a simple question, gives you back a 10-pound answer, takes you a month to decipher.
Yeah.
Banner is solemn and quiet, as opposed to how he appeared in the montage. Losing Laura has deeply affected him. Elaina tries to cheer him up, and her crestfallen expression when she fails tells us how much she cares about him and his well-being. The pilot plays their different dispositions against one another, to highlight the somberness that she's trying to pull him out of.
I staged it so that Bix is aligned against this solid brick wall, and Susan has all the openness of the world around her here. It almost becomes looking a bit like a split screen to emphasize the weight and the wall that he's staring at as opposed to the openness of Susan's attitude.
Their first scene together tells us a lot about their relationship.
Dreaming again? Bad as before?
Yeah.
Banner felt comfortable telling her about his nightmares. He trusts her. Elaina, on the other hand, understands him well enough to immediately pinpoint the cause of his particularly dour mood.
It's been almost a year.
11 months. Tomorrow.
Banner is overly fixated on the loss of his wife. Nearly a year later, he still thinks about it constantly. That, coupled with his drastic change in mood, is concerning to Elaina. They get a call. Someone they're interviewing for their research has arrived. Banner asks her to bring them in while he grabs a donut.
You want anything? I'll bring you Sprite.
Banner makes an effort to lift the mood for Elena's sake. He doesn't want her to worry. She acknowledges this with a smile of her own, but that smile disappears when he walks off. She knows he's putting on a mask. Elaina is worried about Banner's concerning mental state. He's picked up on this and tries to alleviate her fear, but it's not convincing, and Elaina doesn't know what to do.
We see the relationship and at the same time her concern for where he is and the obsession.
It takes just one scene to establish this much about their dynamic. Throughout the episode, we get further hints at a history and intimacy between the two.
Well, I always liked your mother.
She always liked you.
I'm gonna help you with these.
As always.
Hey, I made that just like when we were in med school. Extra mayonnaise and everything.
There's a deep care and love between them.
And their sort of unspoken love and affection for each other, which grows during the course of the piece, was very important to me as well.
All of this goes to build up a relationship that is crucial to the story. Another element of tragedy is character. The hero must be noble, with a flaw that causes his own downfall. These factors are necessary to evoke pity and fear, which is crucial to achieving catharsis. Pity is elicited by the hero meeting unmerited misfortune. For it to feel unmerited, it must befall a good man. Otherwise, the audience would likely feel moral satisfaction, not pity, at seeing a bad person get their comeuppance.
That guy sucked!
So the hero must be noble. However, the downfall must be due to his own failing. If it were entirely removed from the hero's character, the audience would be more likely to feel shock than pity. Imagine a man suddenly killed in a car accident. It's shocking more than it's pitiable.
Oh, careful. Careful now!
To evoke fear, the hero must be noble and relatable. He is a good man, so the audience is more likely to fear for him when he's faced with conflict. But he's also flawed, so the audience can relate with him and empathize with his circumstances. These characteristics combined elicit pity and fear, helping the audience achieve catharsis, which is something I'll talk more about later. So how does this apply to the episode? Well, the following interaction is a small-scale example of how Banner embodies the noble hero trait. He leaves to grab him and Elaina some donuts, while she meets with the woman they're interviewing along with her son. Banner returns with only one donut, since it's all they had. He offers to split it. He gives half to the kid and then halves the remaining with Elaina, feeding it to her in a surprisingly intimate gesture. Banner went to get a donut for himself, but doesn't hesitate to split it with others, ending up with only a quarter of what he originally wanted. Yet there's no sign of dissatisfaction from Banner. He's happy to sacrifice what he wanted for the sake of others. This quality will be expressed time and again throughout the series. Later in this episode, when the danger of the Hulk becomes evident, Banner is primarily concerned with Elena's safety. Curing him of the Hulk is less about personal convenience than about the well-being of others.
Obviously, if the Hulk let loose were evil or were to hurt people, Dr. Banner would have to immediately go to the police and say, I must turn myself in. And we could never have continued with the series.
Banner consistently puts others before himself, and when people try to repay him for his good deeds, he resists vehemently. It's about doing the right thing, not getting rewarded. For example, in the second pilot, Death in the Family, Banner is investigating a lead on a cure when he stumbles upon a girl who's the victim of a conspiracy. He drops everything to help her. There's also the season 2 premiere, Married. Banner finds a doctor who might be able to cure him, but she's suffering from a deadly disease of her own. Rather than convince her to focus the time she has left on helping him, he dedicates everything to saving her, with only the off chance she might be able to return the favor. Basically, Banner's a good guy. As for the second condition of character, the hero's flaw that leads to his downfall, the pilot goes in depth on Banner's. It's his overwhelming obsession with finding out why he couldn't save Laura. First of all, he's overly fixated on the accident that took her life.
It's been almost a year.
11 months. Tomorrow.
And the research he's conducting is directly related to his inability to save her. In a later episode, we learn he pushed aside other vital work to focus on this.
Did you work with David Banner? Why did he suddenly abandon his research on diseases such as mine?
His wife died, and after that, his work took on other priorities.
What a shame. His work in the area of my disease was brilliant. It was pioneering.
And over the course of their research, she becomes increasingly emotional. When they interview their first subject, she recounts a tale disturbingly similar to his own. Except in her case, she succeeded where he failed. As she tells her story, Banner flashes back to the accident. It stirs up his emotions, his anger, and makes him more and more unstable until, at the end, he has to abruptly leave.
But how could she find the strength and I couldn't? And in every other case that we've researched, it's been the same story over and over and over again. But what is the common denominator?
He needs to find out why he couldn't lift that car, why he was unable to tap into the hidden strength that all humans possess.
And this becomes, of course, the piece that drives his obsession and his determination to understand why he couldn't turn this car over when, in similar circumstances, other people had been able to.
And while the research is adversely affecting him, the reverse is also true.
I warned you when we went into this. I felt you were too close to it because of what happened to Laura. And now it's starting to affect your work.
Banner's emotions are increasingly clouding his objective, rational mind, causing him to make obvious mistakes. Like when they discover all their test subjects have the same abnormality in their DNA. Banner says,
At least we know they're different from me.
No, we don't.
What?
When was the last time you had your DNA magnified 1,000,000 times?
so desperate he is for an answer, he nearly jumps to an incomplete conclusion. Turns out his DNA has the same abnormality, bringing them back to square one. All of this comes to a head later that night. His colleague Ben informs him of some gamma-ray interference they've been getting from the sun. This gets Banner to thinking. He looks over a graph of gamma-ray fluctuations and finds high gamma for the dates of other subjects' incidents, but low gamma for his incident. He finally has a solid lead. He tries to call Elaina to let her know, but she doesn't pick up. It's then that Banner's obsession, his character flaw, officially drives him to his downfall, to a mistake that is simultaneously unforeseen yet inevitable. Thinking this might be his long-sought answer, he decides to test it. Now.
I tried to call you, but you weren't here, and I was anxious.
Over-anxious.
He goes down to radiology and sets up a gamma injection, turning the knob to what would typically be 300,000 units. That high a dose alone would be enough for concern.
How much did you take?
I went all the way and I took 300,000 units.
Oh, David!
But the units are marked by a strip of blank tape.
Notice the blank tape comes back to haunt us.
Now, if Banner had a clear head, he'd probably recall what he and Elaina discussed earlier.
You know, Ben's been souping up a lot of our equipment in higher power. Did he happen to modify this particular unit for higher magnification?
Yeah, he has a tape mark here for 1,000,000.
But he's too focused to consider what the blank tape might mean, and doesn't realize until it's too late.
Are you saying that Ben modified the radiology unit in excess of 300,000, but there was no marking on the tape?
Well, he hadn't calibrated it yet.
Well, how high did he get?
Almost 2,000,000 units.
And because he's doing this alone in the middle of the night, there's no one there to monitor this for him. No one to see the units tick up beyond what's safe, and no one to see the danger light flashing. Banner bombards himself with the gamma rays. At first, it seems like nothing happened. He's back to square one. Again. The result enrages him further.
I lifted the car. That's all.
How could she find the strength and I couldn't?
Then a series of compounding factors work together to make him furious. Rain, a flat tire, a struggle to change it, all on top of yet another failure. And we reach the climax of Banner's obsession, the ultimate consequences, what Banner's own flaw has turned him into. Banner's anger triggers a metamorphosis into the Incredible Hulk. He is the personification of his inner demon, the underlying emotion that drives his obsession, the frustration, the anger, the fury, born from failing to save Laura.
Again, Bix remembering his trauma again, and it was anxious to try to really set up the anger and the obsession that was boiling inside this man.
Ever since the accident, this anger has been festering inside him. It's been let out in small doses over his frustrations with their research, but it's the gamma injection, the creation of the Hulk, that lets it manifest all at once. Banner loses control and succumbs to the rage within. The concept of being overcome with anger is very relatable. Everyone has experienced that sense of losing control.
And rather than having him Hulk out for the first time because he'd been beaten up or something like that, I wanted it to come from something everybody could recognize, from a frustration and a sense of anger that we all might have encountered. Within each of us oft times dwells a mighty and raging fury. I think that that's something that everyone has felt at one time or another. That sense of just wanting to explode. There's a visceral connection that people have to that feeling of anger.
This plays into the next element of tragedy. Thought. No, not that kind of thought. That kind. It refers to the ideas, themes, arguments, and messages expressed by the story. In tragedy, thought-provoking ideas and questions about human existence, morality, and fate are explored. The Hulk as Banner's unchecked emotions plays into the series' larger themes about the inner demons that all people possess.
This became a thematic piece, of course, that ran through the entire series. What we would try to do was episodes of The Incredible Hulk as a series that manifested the Hulk in different ways in different people. For Banner, it was, of course, anger. For other people, it was maybe alcoholism, or it was obsession, or it was greed that would turn them into something other than the good human being they were.
The underlying theme was really self-control, was really how to control the raging beast that dwelled within him. In Dr. Banner, his demon within was anger. But with other people, it could be alcohol, or it could be drugs, or it could be obsession, or it could be greed.
Wherever Banner goes, he finds people grappling with monsters of their own creation.
It was bound to happen. When you create a monster like that, eventually it's just going to take control of you.
The series also touches upon the topic of fate in Banner's search for a cure. No matter where he goes or what he tries, the Hulk remains.
The metaphor, of course, I'm going for here is that no matter where Bix goes, the creature is not far behind. Haunting image of Bix being pursued by this curse.
This broaches the question, is Banner cursed? Is he fated to remain the Hulk forevermore? Will he continue to pay the price for his mistake until the end of his days? Every episode ends the same, with Banner walking off, alone, looking for a cure.
That was one of the things that you could count on, is at the end he was going to be alone again.
I don't remember an event or whether the ratings were terrible or why we were canceled. I just remember that it ended. By accidentally ending open-ended was sort of a nice metaphor for his anger.
I think the ending is he's walking off all by himself, just like always. You know that those stories continue to go on after we're off the air, that he's still out there looking for his cure.
So Banner transforms into the Hulk. He smashes up his car and flips it into a ditch. Then it explodes for some reason. I think that was a 70s thing. At the time, cars were always spontaneously exploding. Having the Hulk flip a car is a deliberate choice. At the beginning of the episode, Banner couldn't so much as lift one. But now, as the Hulk, he can chuck one into a ditch. It quickly demonstrates the difference in strength. It's also laced with thematic meaning. Banner finally got what he wanted, but at what cost? Once the source of his anger is destroyed, Hulk wanders through the forest. He sees a little girl fishing and approaches to see what's up. In this state between full-on rage and true calm, Hulk becomes a curious creature.
And the Hulk is not evil. He is rage manifested in a physical form, only focused on what made him angry to begin with. But once he has solved that problem, he's a fish out of water. He is lost, helpless as a child, wandering around trying to find out. He has no idea how he got here or why he is here.
Hulk is not a monster in the moral sense. He's like Frankenstein's monster, benevolent but misunderstood.
This is my favorite part.
No, you're hurting me! No!
I mean, I think I've never actually seen Frankenstein.
Take even the Hulk. Originally, my idea was to create a lovable monster. When I was a kid, I loved the Frankenstein movie. I always felt that the monster, he was the good guy. He didn't want to hurt anybody. He didn't know what he was doing. And all these idiots with torches used to chase him up and down the hills, and he didn't know where to go or what to do.
As we went on and on with the series, Louis just kept getting better and better all the time. I was particularly proud of the moments when he wasn't raging and angry, but when he was sensitive and curious, like Frankenstein's monster, not understanding what was going on.
When Hulk stumbles upon the little girl, she freaks and leaps into a boat, but falls overboard. Hulk brings down a tree for her to grab onto, trying to help her, because he's not a bad guy. He doesn't necessarily want to hurt anybody.
You'll notice also that Lou never hits anybody. He'll shove people, he'll break things. So the creature did a lot of property damage, but he never really put his fist in anybody's face.
He was a real gentle soul that he didn't mean to hurt anybody. He was always running because he was frightened. And the Hulk knew that every time he hears siren, his life going to be in danger. He always kind of kept running.
The girl's father shows up and, thinking that Hulk's trying to hurt her, shoots at him.
Get away from my daughter, you hairy teenager!
Hulk will remember that.
Oh, the gun jams. How convenient.
He smashes the gun and... Whoa. Did he just grab that dude by the cock? Cock grab? Guess we know what inspired Ang Lee's doggy dick punch. Hulk tosses him into the lake. All the while, this little girl will not shut the fuck up.
Get away from me! Daddy! Daddy, help! No, stay away! Help! Help, Daddy! Don't get away!
Are you all right?
Hulk destroys their camp and runs off. He tends to his wounds and reverts back into Banner. At this point, you might have noticed how radically different this adaptation of the Hulk is from the comics. It's kept the core idea of a scientist named Banner being turned into a misunderstood monster by the power of Gamma, but just about everything else is different. There's no Gamma Bomb, no Betty, no General Ross or US military, and no Rick Jones. Not even the main character's name is the same. Well, producer, director, writer Kenneth Johnson wasn't a fan of the comics, and wanted to diverge from them as much as possible. He thought they were too hokey for a show he wanted adults to take seriously.
I was not a big fan of comic book stuff, so I'd never heard of the Hulk at all. And a lot of people hadn't. It was one of the lower tier of the Marvel characters at the time. Stan told me.
Incidentally, we always called him the Creature in the scripts. We never called him the Hulk. I couldn't deal with that word very well. My pilot script, incidentally, was called The Hulk. There was no Incredible in it. I just couldn't bring myself to use that. I think Jack Colvin is the only one that ever refers to him either as the Hulk or as Incredible. And of course, the Hulk never spoke. In the comic book, he sort of had Hulk speak, a bit like the Frankenstein monster, but I felt that it was just going to demean the project if we did that.
Ken Johnson had a philosophy from day one that we should always never speak down to the audience, never write down to the audience, never think that you're writing a comic book.
We never thought of it as a comic book. The word was never mentioned. We were constrained by having him turn green twice an episode, but that was it.
I was very anxious to cast exactly the right person in the leading role. I needed someone who would bring an adult following, who was a serious actor, and who would not be thought of as being in something that was anything other than first class. Bill Bixby was my first and only choice. We sent him the script, his agent gave it to him, and Bix read it and called me the next day and came over and said, "Is this what we're gonna do?" And I said, "Yeah, are we really gonna do this? Is it gonna be this drama? Is it gonna be like this excitement, this real human stuff?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "Not gonna be all comic booky." I said, "No." When his manager, Paul Braden, gave him the script originally, Bix's reaction was the same as mine. He said, "I don't want to be involved in anything called the Incredible Hulk." Her agent sent her the script, and Mary had said, "I don't want to read anything called the Incredible Hulk."
Suffice it to say, the cast and crew weren't too keen on the original material. The only person involved that actually seemed to like the comics was Lou Ferrigno.
And to have that part, knowing that it was something I've been dreaming about for 20 years as a little boy, reading those comics, fantasizing becoming the Hulk, it was kind of like a dream coming true.
The results are a Hulk show that isn't very faithful to the source material. Nevertheless, I think it still captures the spirit of the comics, the heroic man cursed to become a misunderstood beast. The show explores this dynamic with sincerity and gravitas. It doesn't treat it like a joke. Stan Lee, creator of the Hulk, seemed to think the same. For the most part, he agreed with the changes.
When we started the television show, Ken said to me, "Stan, I don't think the Hulk should talk." The minute he said it, I knew he was right. Oh, I could get away with it in a comic, but that would have sounded so silly if he spoke that way in a television show. It was such a good show. Ken did everything right. People have always said to me, "Don't you resent the fact that he was changed a little bit in the series?" Hell no, every change was an improvement.
Although, Stan wasn't happy with all the proposed changes. Hulk's color, for one.
I fought endlessly and unfortunately lost the battle about the color of the Hulk. I called Stan Lee, who was a wonderful guy, and I said, "Stan, what is he, the envious Hulk? Why is he green? When people are angry, they get red with rage, The color of rage is red. He would be flushed with anger, and also, it's a human color. Green is not." And I couldn't win that battle, so the Hulk unfortunately had to remain green.
They also disagreed about changing Banner's name. In the show, he's David Bruce Banner, rather than Robert Bruce Banner, or just Bruce Banner. In this case, Kenny got his way. However, there seems to be some disagreement on why the name was changed. Kenny claims it was because he didn't like the alliteration, and that, once he explained his gripes, Stan was on board.
One of the first things I did was change David Banner's name from Bruce Banner. The Bruce Banner thing is like Lois Lane, Peter Parker. It's all alliterative. It all harkens back to comic book roots. And I was trying to do everything I could to get the show away from comic book roots and that kind of feeling.
And Stan understood what I wanted to do it. He said, "You want to change the name of my character?" I said, "Yeah, I do, Stan, and here's why," and he understood it.
But according to Stan, this went down quite differently. He claims they changed the name because Bruce sounded too...
I'm gay.
And some genius at the network said, "Oh no, Stan, Bruce makes him sound homosexual. It sounds gay."
Not only was the reasoning different, but the request apparently came from the network and not Kenny. Stan's story is corroborated by Lou.
when the Hulk series began, CBS changed the name from Bruce to David because they said Bruce sounded gay.
This is a version of events that Kenny outright rejects.
The prime reason that I changed the name of Bruce Banner to David Banner, it had zero to do with any kind of a gay slur.
I'm not sure what the truth is. Both Stan and Lou confirm each other's stories. But Kenny was the producer, director, and writer on the show. He knew everything that was going on. So who knows what the truth is? It shall remain a mystery. Returning from that lengthy tangent, we cut to Elaina's house.
Because this is a television show, she will put on her robe before she comes out, to everyone's disappointment. Or at least the guys on the crew.
Banner arrives, disheveled and confused. He tells her about the discovery he made last night, and about the gamma injection. He remembers driving home and changing a flat tire. Then it's mostly blank until suddenly he's standing in a forest the next morning.
I remember feeling incredibly strong. It was me, and it wasn't me.
They're interrupted by the doorbell. Banner hides while Elaina greets McGee, still trying to get an interview. He sees Banner in a mirror, Elaina in a bathrobe, concludes they're slamma-jamming, and leaves them to it.
I won't bother you since you're, otherwise involved.
Grin, grin, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, say no more.
The scene's only purpose is to remind the audience that McGee is a character that exists. This interaction doesn't actually affect anything. Banner and Elaina go to the Southwest lab where it's isolated to figure out what happened to him. They stick him in a pressure chamber just in case. They then learned that Banner's gamma injection was more like 2 million units, not the intended 300,000.
I don't know what I blundered into, but it could be the natural outgrowth of all our research. We have to try and make it happen again so that we can observe it here, in a laboratory situation where we can control it.
It hasn't sunken in yet, the extent of the trouble he's in, so he prioritizes studying his transformation over curing it. His obsession compels him to do so, despite the danger.
We can always try the X-ray reversal, but we might have found what we've been looking for, and we can't just throw it away without investigating it first.
Elaina tries to talk some sense into him, but he's adamant about pursuing this reckless action. He assumes there won't be any severe consequences.
Maybe I'll just bang around in here for a while. Look, it was built to withstand the pressure of 1,000 feet below the ocean.
They try to recreate the circumstances of Banner's first transformation, simulating the darkness, the rain, and even the lightning, but to no avail.
What's wrong? Why won't it work?
Whoa, calm down, Jamal.
We cut to a little later. Banner has regressed back into a somber state. His emotions have died down, gaining back some rationality.
I'm sorry about all the hassle over this.
Look, you may be in there alone, but we're in this together, huh?
As usual.
As usual.
Since Laura died, Banner has been alone, aside from Elaina. She understands him, she can make him laugh and smile, and she goes out of her way to help him. She's the only bright spot left in his dour life. This dynamic is represented visually. We get a shot of Banner in the dark chamber, with Elaina framed as a small square of light through the window. At the same time, there's the sense that they're being kept distinctly apart. The episode uses imagery to reinforce this idea as well.
Of course, they had not been lovers or anything because he had been married up until very recently. So it's close but don't touch, which is what we wanted to play. Susan almost touches him here and then realizes and pulls her hands back just to keep that separation. This is a particularly sweet moment between the two of them where they're separated by the glass. They're always a little bit separated here, trying to keep them always just a little at arm's length from each other in spite of the affection that they clearly feel, and emphasized by the light solo piano. Nice little moment here as they touch, but they don't touch.
Banner's emotional baggage is preventing him from bridging this gap. His grief and obsession is walling him off from human connection and isolating him. When they both put their hands on the glass, he turns away, while her hand lingers, and she looks sad. He's ignorant of the barrier he's erected between them, while she's painfully aware.
I staged it so that Bix is aligned against this solid brick wall, and Susan has all the openness of the world around her here. It almost becomes looking a bit like a split screen to emphasize the weight and the wall that he's staring at as opposed to the openness of Susan's attitude.
To emphasize this point, we hear, for the first time, the Lonely Man theme. This theme is used to signify Banner's isolation and loneliness, brought on by his inner demon. Which brings us to the next element of tragedy, song. It refers to the use of music to comment on the action and interact with the characters. At the end of every episode, no matter how happy the conclusion, and no matter the friends he's made along the way, Banner always has to leave, accompanied by this theme.
Most every Universal show ended with a big, rousing, orchestral conclusion. Joe Harnell said, "Is that what you want for this?" And I said, "No, this is a lonely man by himself. It ought to be a piece of music that is poignant as we can make it without getting sappy, that really plays into the pathos of this character." I said, "Joe, it ought to be a solo piano at the end of the pilot and at the end of every episode."
Joe Harmel's theme was touching because it really embodied the loneliness of David Banner so well. The theme is deceptive in its simplicity. It's those 4 notes.
The song represents how, as long as the Hulk dwells within him, he'll always be a danger to the people around him, and so he can never remain in one place for long.
The metaphor, of course, I'm going for here is that no matter where Bix goes, the creature is not far behind. Haunting image of Bix being pursued by this curse.
The Lonely Man theme is used in versatile ways to give insight into Banner's thoughts and emotions. For instance, when Banner meets Dr. Carolyn Fields, he starts living with her as they investigate cures for their respective afflictions. For the first time in so long, Banner has a place to call home, and gets to be himself with a chick that digs him.
What time is it?
The theme is interrupted, demonstrating that Banner doesn't feel so lonely anymore. He's finally got the chance to embrace companionship and love despite the Hulk. The theme is used similarly in other places to represent Banner staving off loneliness and isolation.
You ever been alone? Nobody pulling for you? I guess it is getting pretty late.
The show's music is also used to accent the action, to drive anticipation for the next story beat.
The music in the Hulk, they were a cue for the audience. The audience could anticipate when a Hulk out was going to happen, when we were going to turn away from the action and go into plot, story, character. The music kind of got the audience ready for what was coming.
To have music going while helicopters are going is very difficult because the music usually gets swallowed. And I said to Joe Harnell, let's synthesize the sound of a helicopter blade. We'll use that instead of the helicopter sound effect. And you can make it in sync with the music so that the rhythm of the helicopter blade is also the rhythm of the music that we're doing, and we can balance it, everything. And Joe said, what a great idea. He loved it because it would protect his music. And if you listen carefully at the end of part 1 of Prometheus, you can hear that helicopter blade and how it's absolutely in sync with the music. It's because it's part of the music.
And it's used to give the action additional emotional weight.
The beauty of it is, it's a man who is seeking peace. That's why I always love the love. They only use a single piano in my character. But as more and more aggravation joins his life, so the music starts as well as we get toward that anxiety or that frustration, which makes him Hulk out.
The show also knows when to pull back on the music entirely.
Sometimes think the best music cues are the ones that are not written, when you can afford to just let the actors play or the silence play, the sound effects play. You recall the music stopped entirely when Bix woke up at the very beginning of the piece from his nightmare. And again, we've done it here. It begins to set up a tension of its own. Joe had originally written a really powerful music cue that ran under this whole piece, and Kyle and his sound effects guys had put together all of the sound effects under here. And when we got it on the dubbing stage, it was just too much. And we had decided that we'd been in music for so long that it would be better to maybe just play all of this with silence and with the sort of drone of human voices underneath it all.
This increases the impact of moments of silence, as well as moments when the music accentuates tone and atmosphere. If you're liking the video so far, consider hitting the old subscribble button. I've decided to try out YouTube memberships, so if you're interested in getting more out of the channel, just hit join below. You get access to custom emojis, end of video shoutouts, members only polls, etc. More info on memberships at the end. Now back to the video. Banner takes a nap and has a nightmare about the accident, causing his readings to go erratic. Elaina starts taking an audio log of her observations, before the readings abruptly stop. She approaches the pressure chamber, and Hulk punches through the glass. He smashes up the inside, trying to force his way out. He escapes from the chamber, and Elaina attempts to talk him down. She takes a sample of his blood, then gets him to sit down with soothing words. Finally, he calms his green ass down and reverts back into Banner.
You're a very brave woman, Elaina.
She's a very scared woman.
Elaina is, indeed, brave, and modest too. She came face to face with an angry Hulk after seeing the damage he can do, yet she remained level-headed. Let's talk about Elena's character for a moment. She's an upbeat and charismatic person. She's also deeply caring, going out of her way to help Banner despite the danger. and she's good at remaining composed under pressure, constantly reining in Banner's emotional outbursts. She was even able to soothe him out of a Hulk out. Part of the reason she was so cool facing the Hulk was because she wholeheartedly believed he wouldn't hurt her. Let me explain. After the true danger of the Hulk becomes evident, Banner's obsession completely falls away, replaced by a palpable fear of the harm his alter ego can dish out.
If it can happen anytime I'm asleep, whenever my anger mounts up, even in my unconscious, when the metamorphosis happens, I haven't got any control over it. I don't even know what it does. I might have killed you. Maybe I tried to kill somebody last night. Maybe I did kill somebody.
He becomes concerned for the safety of everyone around him. But Elaina doesn't feel the same. She knew that Hulk would never hurt her because Banner would never hurt her.
Listen to me, David. David Banner is not a killer.
This is a testament to how deeply she trusts him. She'd wager that, even stripped of his conscious mind, she'd still be safe around him. But that brings us to a question we must always ask in these adaptations. What is Hulk? As stated, Elaina thinks of him and Banner as the same. They believe Hulk is Banner, overtaken by his base emotions.
The intelligence level drops, the primitive emotions take over the brain and the body. And that is just what this creature is like. It's like a primitive, it's like a childish subhuman.
Hulk and Banner are one and the same.
David Banner is not a killer.
We're not talking about David Banner.
Yes, we are. This creature is an outgrowth of David Banner. It's his primitive emotions run wild. It may be undisciplined. It may tear the hell out of a pressure chamber. But it won't kill because David Banner won't kill.
This is why, at the end of the day, Hulk is a good guy that doesn't really want to hurt anyone. Because Banner is a good guy that doesn't really want to hurt anyone. When Elaina asks what he felt during the nightmare, he says,
The same thing I always feel every time I have the dream. Outrage, frustration at not being able to save her. Extreme anger.
Hulk is Banner's inner rage, one born of the fury he felt at losing Laura, and at the regret of being unable to save her. Nearly a year later, these feelings continue to drive him.
Again, Bix remembering his trauma, and again, it was anxious to try to really set up the anger and the obsession that was boiling inside this man. We've never had an opportunity to talk about the main title of The Incredible Hulk. I knew that I wanted it to start with the word danger. I realized that I could push in a little bit and start with a word that was even more important to The Incredible Hulk, and that word is anger, and then pull out and show danger.
Hulk is the manifestation of that traumatic rage let loose. Even after Banner puts aside his obsession and becomes devoted to curing himself, that trauma, that anger, still dwells within him. In Season 2, when Banner meets Carol, he helps her find a cure for her terminal disease. In the process, they fall in love. Despite her limited time left, they get married to live out the remainder of her life in marital bliss, should they not find a cure. In turn, she helps him gain control over the Hulk through hypnosis therapy. For the first session, she has him walk her through his first 2 Hulk outs. All the while, she instructs him to remain an unemotional observer. They get through the first Hulk out fine, but the second proves trouble. Recalling the memory of the accident is enough to break him from the hypnosis, make him lose control, and transform. By bringing the memories of Laura's death to the surface, it in turn brings the Hulk to the surface, waking him from his slumber. Several days later, Banner dreams, not just of losing Laura, but of the prospect of losing Carol too. Both loves taken from him too soon. His circumstances with Carol remind Banner so viscerally of his original trauma that it makes him Hulk out. Even as removed as he becomes from the accident, it still haunts him. Back to the pilot. Banner and Elaina get a visit from the police. His car was found turned over and destroyed. They're trying to find out what happened. Banner claims he doesn't know. Some friend of his must have borrowed his car and crashed it. Banner proves to be a comically bad liar.
My car was missing this morning, but,
Did you report it missing?
No. You see, I thought a friend had taken it.
Given how blatantly suspicious he's acting, it's a wonder the cop lets him get away with it. He doesn't so much as ask for the name of this mysterious friend. He doesn't even tell Banner to come down to the station for further questioning. McGee shows up with a cast of Hulk's footprint found at the crash site. I'm not sure why a reporter is allowed to walk off with crime scene evidence, though. He mentions a fisherman and his daughter running into a creature nearby.
Big Hulk, about 7 feet tall, greenish tinge to the skin, pretty mean looking.
McGee suspects Banner knows something, and is determined to find out what. Really, this is when McGee becomes relevant to the story. He functions as additional pressure for Banner to find a cure, and will play a key role in the climax. Before, he was just sorta around. They shoo away McGee, but he opts to hide in the bushes like a creeper. When Banner and Elaina leave, he tries to get in the lab, but it's locked. We cut away to Banner and Elena's failed cure attempt at radiology, and when we cut back, McGee's somehow inside.
As Jack has obviously found some way in here.
But how, though? That's actually pretty important. Had he not gotten in off-screen, the third act doesn't happen. McGee finds Hulk's footprint. When Banner and Elaina return, he hides in a chemical storage room.
And there's a vault there.
Oh, you better believe it. So if our friend does come back, he'll never get out of there.
Conveniently, McGee hears just enough of their conversation to get the wrong idea. Had they been any more specific, he would have known from the start that Banner and Hulk are the same person. They're gonna move their research to a plutonium storage vault. They'll arrange for an accidental radiation spill to keep people from finding the busted pressure chamber. Honestly, I'm surprised it hasn't already been discovered by the rest of the Institute. It's pretty convenient that literally no one goes to that lab except them. You'd think the moment the chamber exploded, it would have set off an alarm or something. Anyway, Banner finds McGee, who knocks over a jug of some chemical. McGee tries to get them to admit they know something about the Hulk. They do their best to deflect, and Banner escorts him out. McGee accuses Banner of lying, and in response, Banner says,
Mr. McGee! Mr. McGee, don't make me angry. You wouldn't like me when I'm angry.
This is the most famous line to come out of the show, and rivals Hulk's smash in synonymy with the Hulk. Why is that? Well, it doesn't hurt that it plays during the intro of every episode. I also think it's because this simple line encapsulates so many dimensions of Banner's character.
Mr. McGee!
It's a little bit of a threat. He's hoping to intimidate McGee into backing off and leaving him alone. This comes from the anger that's always boiling beneath the surface.
Mr. McGee, don't make me angry.
And it's a warning. Banner is a good man, and genuinely doesn't want McGee to get hurt.
You wouldn't like me when I'm angry.
In take one, Bix played the line angrily, and I said, no, Bix, it's a joke.
It's also a joke. Banner's situation is so pitiful, he can't help cracking an inside joke about it.
You know, my mother always used to tell me getting angry doesn't help.
Meanwhile, the jug that McGee knocked over leaks onto the floor. When it comes into contact with another substance, the entire lab fucking explodes. Is that tiny bit of contact enough to obliterate a whole ass building? If so, why would you ever store those substances together? That's just asking for trouble. So, we're at the explosive finale, and it takes a series of contrivances to get here. Banner was inexplicably let off the hook by the police. McGee got into the lab by some unknown means, and a jug tipping over caused an explosion bigly enough to destroy an entire building. Up until now, the episode has been pretty good about naturally flowing from one plot point to the next, but right at the end it stumbles over itself, trying to get us to an exciting action-packed climax. It's the one major flaw in an otherwise well-crafted story. Banner tries to get to Elaina, who's pinned under rubble, but is blocked by flames. This causes him to Hulk out. He leaps into the burning building, frees Elaina, and carries her out. McGee watches as Hulk runs off with her unconscious body. Believing Banner is still inside, he calls out to him, as the lab is engulfed in a giant fireball. I'd like to quickly highlight how the interviews, conducted earlier in the story, work as subtle foreshadowing for all of Hulk's incredible feats. Just like them, Hulk lifted a car, bent metal with his bare hands, bashed through a steel door, and shrugged off gunfire. One woman mentioned getting pinned under a steel beam after an earthquake. Well, Hulk rescues Elaina, who's pinned under rubble after an explosion. This brings us nicely into the next element of tragedy, spectacle, which has to do with the spectacular effects of the piece. Aristotle describes spectacle as an emotional attraction of its own, though it has the least to do with the writing. The show is primarily focused on the drama and character interactions, but still goes out of its way to create awesome set pieces that intensify the story's emotions. Banner's Hulkouts are these horrific mutations that are followed by incredible displays of power. This spectacle works to elicit fear and awe in the audience. And for a TV movie from the 70s, I'd say the effects have aged fairly well, for the most part.
Here's one of the moments when I went back and looked at this that really made me flinch. This transition here with this green sort of pulsating glow. As I looked at this, I found myself saying, oh, it's a little green and glowy for my taste. And I certainly wouldn't do that again. And it was the only moment in the piece, really, where I felt that we hadn't done maybe the best that we could do, although we labored over it at the time.
Yeah, this is pretty rough. The fading between each stage of the makeup is jarring, and the green glow is just awkwardly laid over it. What doesn't help is the stale atmosphere. He's just sitting on a couch staring forward, not very inspired. The audience has nothing else to focus on but the janky effects. Juxtapose this with the first Hulk out, which is... Mwah! Chef's kiss. The rain and darkness obscure the imperfections in the prosthetic makeup. That, combined with the cutting away between each stage of the transformation, avoids any awkward or jarring transitions. And by combining Lou ripping through the shirt with Bixby's writhing face, the illusion of a more fluid change is created. It creates crossover between the actors, blurring the line of when one replaces the other. This is capped off by the music, thunder, and lightning, creating a distinct atmosphere. I think the first Hulk out remains the best transformation in the episode, and, quite possibly, the whole series. It's that good. None that follow are quite as impactful.
And it's so frustrating to look at these scenes now, knowing how incredibly effective they could be nowadays, but we just didn't have the technology in those days to be able to make it happen.
Hulk carries Elaina into the woods, where she wakes up.
I don't know if you can understand me, But I want you to know something, dear David. I have loved you for such a very long time, and I always will.
As Elaina dies, Hulk cries out in anguish, and the lonely man plays again. It signifies how losing Elaina has severed Banner's last human connection. He is now truly alone. It's a poignant interaction. We've seen much of Hulk's anger and a little of his curiosity. Now we get to see his tenderness and sadness. Just as Elaina theorized, he is the physical embodiment of Banner's base emotions. He cares deeply for Elaina, so his reaction to her death is heartfelt and extreme. This is largely due to Lou's portrayal of the Hulk and the humanity he brought to the role.
And he had a gentleness about him, so you paint him green and you put on the prosthesis and you do all that stuff, but there's still a quality that comes through from him.
And there are some scenes in the Hulk that still choke me up, and Lou did a really, really wonderful job and got better and better as the show went on.
We'll get to sometime later, at a funeral for Elaina and the presumed dead Banner. Ben and McGee are in attendance. We learn that McGee reported the Hulk to the authorities as a murder suspect. He also published a story about it.
Was it really necessary to print that?
Well, that's the truth. It's what happened.
And it sells newspapers.
Let's talk about McGee for a second. He's motivated by a desire to write popular stories, with little regard for truth or human decency.
Your newspaper is only interested in reporting murder, rape, horoscopes, UFOs, and Farrah Fawcett.
He'd easily publish something totally made up, as long as the lie was convincing enough.
Your paper, is it true what they said about the $6 million man?
Well, if we printed it, it's true.
McGee primarily cares about fame and influence.
Now, a thing that looks like that Hulk is not going to stay hidden long. When they grab it, that is going to be one of the great stories of the 20th century.
He'll trample on people's wishes and privacy to get what he wants. He callously uses Elena's death to sell papers. And at her funeral, he can only think of what a great story it'll be when her murderer is finally caught.
He's an asshole.
He appears even worse in the eyes of the audience because he blames the Hulk for her death, when he's the one truly responsible.
Susie, my wife, she really felt the personal anger and the irony that I was looking for in my audience in the fact that it is Jack McGee who actually has caused the explosion, which results in the death of Susan's character, a death for which the creature is blamed, and McGee is, of course, pursuing the creature.
But to be fair, he doesn't know this. He honestly thinks Hulk is responsible. And despite being an opportunist, he does seem to have some regard for people's safety and for justice.
If you know anything about this creature, it is your duty to report that to the police.
Throughout the series, Banner sometimes relies on McGee to seek out the truth to expose corrupt individuals. McGee isn't one-dimensional, though that might appear to be the case in the pilot. After everyone leaves, Banner arrives. He recalls the last conversation he and Elaina had, as he smiles sadly at her grave.
I love you, Elaina. I think you love me too, although you never said it.
To add one more layer of heartbreak, not only did Banner lose someone he loved, the last person he had any connection with, but he can't remember that she returned his feelings. As a cruel twist of fate, the emotional wall he erected between them prevented them from admitting their feelings until it was too late. In the end, neither received any closure. Banner leaves, on the run from McGee and law enforcement, in desperate search of a cure. The episode ends with Banner walking into the distance as the lonely man plays. And so does every episode end.
We loved it. It never failed to give you goosebumps. That was one of the things that you could count on, is at the end he was going to be alone again.
This brings us to the final element of tragedy: plot. The plot of a tragedy is about a noble hero's flaw, leading to a reversal of fortune. A reversal that should be, according to Aristotle, good to bad, rather than bad to good, as that elicits the most pity and fear, which more effectively achieves catharsis. At the start of the pilot, Banner couldn't be happier, spending joyful days with Laura, not a care in the world.
It was very important to set this up and the love and affection that he felt for her because of what was to come.
But after her untimely death, Banner's obsession took him down a dark path that cursed him with an uncontrollable power. This led to Elaina, a new yet unexplored love, also being taken from him. Now destined to be alone, he must keep traveling, searching for a cure, or risk getting caught or hurting someone. It's this plot element that separates tragedy from other kinds of stories, and it's what separates this adaptation of the Hulk from its live-action counterparts, which aim for decidedly more hopeful and triumphant endings. In the 2003 and 2008 movies, it ends with Banner getting some control over the Hulk, something this version of the character never manages. He gets close sometimes, but it's always out of reach. Since the pilot sets up the premise for the rest of the show, let's talk about the series as a whole. Because the Hulk was blamed for a murder he didn't commit, and because Banner can't control the Hulk, he lets the world think he's dead, and goes on the run in search of a cure. This premise raises some questions. What would the consequences be if Banner revealed he was still alive right after the fire?
They got a warrant for murder out of him.
A murder which David Banner can never prove he or the creature didn't commit.
I mean, sure, he couldn't concretely prove that neither he nor the Hulk killed Elaina. But conversely, McGee couldn't prove either of them did. Banner had no motive, and could provide eyewitness testimony exonerating Hulk. There's no evidence against either of them. And what follows would basically be the same. Banner would still need to travel across the country for a cure, and he'd still need to avoid McGee's snooping to keep his alter ego's identity hidden. If it was revealed that Banner and Hulk were the same, he wouldn't be able to exonerate him of Elena's murder, since he doesn't remember most of what he does as Hulk. So Banner would still be traveling place to place, except he wouldn't have any need for aliases, hitchhiking, or working odd jobs just to get by, and he'd have easier access to the tech and expertise he needs. This would have been, objectively, the smarter thing to do. So why didn't he? I don't know.
He's smart, but I guess not that smart.
It's kind of a major stumble right at the end of the episode. Regardless, the series that followed went on for 5 seasons. Each episode, more or less, followed the same structure. Banner arrives in a new location. He befriends some good people who find themselves in trouble. Banner goes out of his way, even to his detriment, to help them. He hulks out a couple times to push the plot along and solve some problems. Then Banner leaves, and the cycle repeats. The series is surprisingly formulaic. It's typically the same story beats and the same tropes every time. Some of these tropes include Banner meets a pretty lady that serves as a love interest or a potential love interest. Banner is always conveniently in the right place and time to overhear some vital information or to save someone in trouble. People are overly quick to be violent with Banner, which gets him to Hulk out. Banner conveniently transforms just out of sight, so his secret is safe. McGee is always there immediately after a Hulk sighting. Banner gets comically close to being discovered by McGee. Hulk always makes the situation better, never worse. And vehicles have a habit of spontaneously exploding. While not necessarily a bad thing, this repetitiveness runs the risk of monotony, which might put off some viewers. And that's not to say each episode is a carbon copy of the last. There's still plenty of variety and unique stories. It's just these broad strokes that tend to repeat themselves. Sadly, the show is cut short with an unfinished 5th season, much to the befuddlement of everyone involved.
I don't remember an event or whether the ratings were terrible or why we were canceled. I just remember that it ended.
I don't remember how it went down.
As I remember it, we were good. No one thought it was going to be over.
The cancellation of the show did come as a surprise. There was a fellow named Harvey Shepard who ran CBS for about 20 minutes, but in that 20 minutes, Harvey decided the Hulk was getting tired. I don't know why he decided that, because the ratings were still good.
So if there was something going on, I was not aware of it, and I don't think any of us really were. I don't think Universal was.
The show's cancellation was a real shame, as it was nearly the first live-action depiction of She-Hulk. In the comics, they're cousins.
Kissing cousins? No, they're very platonic.
But in the show, Kenny would have made her Banner's sister.
And I said, besides, I got a great idea for opening the 5th season. I want to do a show where David Banner's sister is dying of a congenital blood disease. And the only thing that can save her is a transfusion from a sibling. Now, what happens when Hulk blood gets into somebody else? And I said, and I'm telling you, America will tune in droves.
Given how Banner himself was handled, we could have expected a thoughtful, dramatic story with the character. Instead, our first live-action depiction of She-Hulk is, well... Yeah, that. Sometime after the show ended, it returned for a series of TV movies. They leaned more into the character's comic book origins, having Hulk interact with Thor and Daredevil. As you can imagine, Kenny had nothing to do with these movies.
There was a talk about doing a Spider-Man Incredible Hulk crossover because both shows were running concurrently.
Don't recall that ever happening. And it never would have happened on my watch, that's for sure anyway.
Bixby actually directed a couple. After that, his involvement with the Hulk IP ended. But Luz was just getting started. He went on to do the Hulk's voice in the 90s animated series, as well as some of the movies.
Hulk now, master. Hulk. Love Betty. Hulk! Smash!
It's kind of ironic, given that Lou didn't voice the Hulk in the 70s show.
And I found Ted Cassidy, who was a wonderful actor. I went to Ted and I said, would you do the voice for me of the Incredible Hulk? Then, unfortunately, when Ted was 46 in 1979, he died. And my friend Charlie Napier, who is an actor whose face you would recognize in an instant, a wonderful character actor who's also got a very deep voice, Charlie came in and did the Hulk for me after that.
Bill Bixby was really the heart of the show.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to I didn't mean to interrupt. I mean, I didn't. I have a problem, Doctor.
He brought a charisma, an earnestness, and a humanity to the character that kept bringing viewers back week after week.
I was very anxious to cast exactly the right person in the leading role. I needed someone who would bring an adult following to it, who was a serious actor, and who would not be thought of as being in something that was anything other than first class. Bill Bixby was my first and only choice.
Bill Bixby is the only actor I can think of who could have pulled it off. And I think a lot of it, besides his talent, was his credibility with the audience.
Bixby was heavily invested in the show's writing and actively fought to keep up the quality.
You couldn't BS the man. The show's running long, we can cut this scene. You're not cutting that scene. That scene tells the audience this about me, and it's going to stay.
But he would say, this could be better. This doesn't make sense. This doesn't track for my character. What can you give me on the page that I can translate onto the screen? And sometimes we'd get annoyed and like, he's making us work harder. But he was right, ultimately. He kept that point of view.
Like his character on the show, Bixby's life was filled with tragedy and anger.
Bix had gone through a very, very difficult divorce from Brenda Binet, so there was a lot of angst going on. They had had such antagonism toward each other during the divorce times. It was funny, you could see the Hulk coming out of Bix, this anger that he felt toward Brenda during the divorce. It was very much on his sleeve, and you could really feel it.
Bill wanted a show so his son could see that his mom and dad, even though they were going through a divorce, could get along. So he wanted us to write a show for Brenda Binet. I came up with The Psychic, which was about a woman who could read minds and was thinking about suicide because a young boy had died that she couldn't save.
Season 4 came the real tragedy when Bix's 6-year-old son, Christopher, died unexpectedly.
Brenda killed herself out of guilt, and that one was such a glaring, bizarre set of circumstances that everything else pales in memory.
The marriage with Bill and Brenda unfortunately dissolved, and it left Bill with a tremendous amount of residual anger. It was always somewhat interesting to me that a man who played Dr. David Banner, whose cross to bear was his anger, could be as angry as Bill would sometimes get about Brenda and about their situation. Really, really dark and almost venomous sometimes. Always, though, protecting Christopher, his son, from it and just trying to maintain when Christopher was around.
Despite his tumultuous personal life, Bixby was able to push forward with his work on the show.
He was incredibly professional, though, Bix was, and in spite of whatever was going on in his personal life, he could always manage to take a deep breath and to find his way into the moment that he needed to be in as an actor on the set. After Christopher's death, he determined to go on. I don't think we shut down the production for more than a week. He was anxious to get back. He was anxious to work. He was anxious to do everything that he could to just keep pressing forward. I had to give him enormous credit for the courage that took, given the grief and the circumstances and the pain of losing a child, as that's obviously not something anyone ever gets over. But he was there, and he worked every day and worked hard and was certainly never looking for anyone's pity.
His ability to keep moving forward through grief and anger would come to exemplify Bixby's philosophy for life.
I don't think of myself as a brave man, but sometimes you face circumstances over which you have no control and over which there are really no choices. Do it. Just do it.
On the show, Banner's inner demon was the raging fury that dwelt within, which he was never able to control or overcome. Bixby, however, was able to overcome his anger, even in the face of greater and greater turmoil.
After the death of Christopher and then the death of Brenda, that anger, of course, was sort of dissipated. And yet still, Bix was such a consummate actor that he could always go to wherever he needed to get to give you the performance that you needed. But ultimately, it all came from a wellspring of talent that was deep within him that really showed itself all the way through the series. Dr. David Banner's life had a lot of tragedy in it, and so did Bix. About a year after Christopher had died so unexpectedly, Brenda, his ex-wife, took her own life. Shortly after that, diagnosed with prostate cancer, and he came home to discover a note from his second wife saying that she really couldn't deal with it, and she was leaving him. That second time, there was not the anger that I had seen in him during the difficult times with Brenda, because he said, you know, Kenny, I can't waste my energy on being angry. I have to try to hold on to all the energy that I can and keep it as positive as I can to try to live as long as I can. And indeed, that's what he focused on. It was a transformation, a metamorphosis, if you will, within Bill Bixby that took him to a whole different place and a whole different level. Shortly after that, found a new lady who became really the love of his life and was with him all the way through until the end.
As was demonstrated in the series time and again, inner demons are not insurmountable. Bixby embodied this ideal. His life continued to parallel his character on the show in other ways. Banner faced one disaster after the next, yet was still determined to help people, always putting others before himself. Bixby also faced many hurdles in life, yet resolved to push forward, showing up for the people that relied on him. Banner was always searching for a cure, no matter how hopeless it seemed. He never gave up. He never gave in to his curse. Later in life, Bixby battled a curse of his own in the form of cancer, and he too never gave up, no matter how bleak things seemed.
I know that some people who have been told they have cancer quit. When the C word hits their mind, they simply stop. They cease to live and give themselves to dying. That's not my intention. You come and get me, and you drag me away, but I'm not going to contribute to my own death.
Bill Bixby poured a lot of himself into the show. He embodied the charisma, kindness, and determination of Banner, which formed the heart of the series. So it's only fitting that the Incredible Hulk helped cement his legacy, ensuring his hard work would not go unacknowledged even 40+ years later. Bixby died in 1993, but is still fondly remembered today for his iconic contribution to an iconic franchise.
My grandmother always says, people never die as long as somebody remembers them.
Certainly that is true of my dear friend Bill Bixby.
The Incredible Hulk is a surprisingly timeless show, aside from the special effects and a few elements that are very 70s. It holds up and is celebrated 4 decades later.
The popular series created an entire new legion of Hulk fans, many who were unaware of the comic book.
There's almost nobody anywhere in the world who doesn't remember the Incredible Hulk, played by Lou Ferrigno and Bill Bixby.
It's interesting, Stan had always said that it was really the Hulk, our series actually, that really started the snowball of the Marvel that we know today.
And I love the Bill Bixby Hulk. Like, he's it for me. He's always, for anyone our age, like he's, you know, him walking away at the end of the show.
Yeah.
That's it.
It continues to influence live-action depictions of the Hulk to this day.
Don't make me angry. You wouldn't like me when I'm angry.
Me está enojando. No le gustaría verme enojado. Não me deixe conforme. Não bom quando eu fome.
Don't make me angry. You wouldn't like me when I'm angry.
To varying degrees, the 2003 and 2008 movies made use of the name David, and also aped the on-the-run status quo.
Marvel wasn't afraid to adopt what worked in the past.
We wanted to go back to the broader sense from the comics and really the fugitive-type manhunt structure of the television series, which was just brilliant. It was a great structure for the Hulk. We wanted to find an actor who really could fill the shoes of Bill Bixby, who is really the iconic Bruce Banner for a number of generations. Someone that was fascinating and interesting in his own right, so that when you're watching Bruce Banner go about his struggles for the cure in our film, it's just as interesting as when you're seeing Hulk leap from a building or smash a car or pull up a Humvee out of the ground.
The 2008 movie is basically a Hollywood blockbuster version of an episode of the show, with Edward Norton doing his best Bill Bixby.
For the next generation of Hulks, do you have a favorite between like Eric Bana, Ed Norton, and Mark Ruffalo?
I like Ed Norton because he's very close to Bill Bixby.
The Incredible Hulk uses the elements of tragedy to craft an impactful story and compelling characters. Diction, character, thought, song, spectacle, and plot are utilized to great effect, creating an engaging and cathartic experience. Despite some turmoil behind the scenes, the writing, directing, and acting all come together to create a show that stands the test of time. The Incredible Hulk continues to be relevant and is an iconic entry in the Hulk franchise. Thanks for watching. If you're interested in getting more out of the channel, you can become a member by hitting join below. For $1, you get custom emojis and access to members-only polls. And for $3, you get an end-of-video shoutout and access to members-only videos. If you stick around, I've got quite a lot of Hulk content already on the channel. I've done a series on Hulk's character throughout the MCU, a review of She-Hulk, and a video on Ang Lee's Hulk. And I talk about other things too, if you're interested in that kind of thing. So like, subscribe, join, and until next time.
God, if only there was an older, really horny nurse here.